Kristen Zavo began her career in finance, specifically investment banking and consulting, and is now an executive and job search coach and keynote speaker. In addition, she's the best-selling author of Job Joy, Your Guide to Success, Meaning, and Happiness in Your Career. Her mission is to help high achievers build careers they love and love them back. I can't wait to hear about that because that's the tricky part, it seems to me. Kristen, thank you so much for taking part in this conversation titled Finding Resilience and Feeling Joy Even in Crisis when you're dealing with navigating workplace bullying. So thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much.
Good topic. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really. Oh, yeah. Okay. So much to talk about. And let me start with this. You're doing all this great work now. We're going to get into that. But like many of us, your experience in corporate America before you got into coaching and consulting and writing wasn't all that great. It didn't seem like your job loved you back. Tell us about that a little bit.
Where to begin? Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Finance, just like, your past career, finance is a very intense, very punishing, at least my experience. It was a very punishing environment. I started in investment banking, then I got into financial consulting, and specifically, I worked with companies who were going through Chapter 11. So you take an already intense, super intelligent, super hustle culture, and then you add in the relevant urgency and crisis of bankruptcies. And of course, it's not going to be an environment for the faint of heart.
and misery. You forgot to mention misery that involves Chapter 11. So already people are miserable.
Yeah, people are miserable. And when we would walk in, even before, because obviously employees don't necessarily know that their management is about to file. But when my consulting firm would walk in, it was like we were the Grim Reapers. Everyone knew then. If they didn't know before, now they knew.
Yeah.
Right?
And so how did that affect you? And what was the effect on you in terms of being in these environments?
Yeah. So, it started positive. I love a challenge. I've always loved being around really smart, really driven people. So it certainly wasn't all bad. I was always learning. There was always, I get bored easily. There was always a new project or a new problem to solve. But the intensity, we were working 70, 80-hour weeks. The nature of consulting, it's billable. The more you bill, the more you're rewarded, right? There is an expectation. You should be the first in, you should be the last out. I remember getting in trouble because I was working, it was actually Lehman Brothers. And I left at 6 to take a spin class to come back and finish my work later. But because they didn't see me come back, it was like, leaving at 6 o'clock. How dare
you? Yeah.
How dare she take care of herself and go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And so, you had the punishing hours, you had the intense work, certainly you're not getting any positive the positive feedback is that you're not in trouble, right? You hours and hours and hours, 40 hours on a PowerPoint presentation, they would spend 5 minutes on and you couldn't even be in the room. Like it was just, it was intense in a lot of ways, but I had the grit. I was able to handle it. But what you and I talked about before we even, pressed record, there were pieces that were definitely toxic. And at the time, I was in my 20s. I don't know if I would have called it bullying. I don't even know if I would have called it toxic, but I knew it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't sustainable, but I didn't know what else to do. I felt stuck. Approaching 30, I thought, oh my God, I have to have it figured out.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, if there's anyone around 30 watching this, you have all a lifetime ahead of you. 30 is
yes, it's going to be okay. You have time. Yeah.
And by the way, no one has it figured out. But I was stuck. And so, then it was a matter of, is there something wrong with me? Why can't I hack it? Because no, you wouldn't show weakness.
You couldn't.
And no, if they think that you want to pull back on hours or you can't, be there with the team till 11 o'clock at night, it shows as a weakness. And then it's maybe you're not cut out for this. You're not going to get on projects. Right. And so there's this fear in addition to the schedule, in addition to very strong personalities, yelling, throwing chairs. Like there was a lot of, I see the expression on your face.
Yeah. Cause you in my world in journalism, I was in television, you call that bearing the lead. So that's the headline, that it was pretty toxic. And so talk about that. And then I remember from our previous conversation, I think migraines ensued.
Yeah. So, when we know something's not right for us, normally we know it, but we're in denial because we don't want to look at what it means. I thought it was too late to change at that point. And it takes, I mean, let's be real, it takes a lot of courage to admit that this isn't right for you and then to do the work to change. It's a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And so what I did, rather than admit it to myself, is I went and I got more certifications and degrees. I tried to play the game. I then would add in mindfulness. And I got into meditation, and I one positive, it put me on my personal development journey. So of
Okay.
sense,
And so
right?
here, yeah.
But the thing is, meditation and somatic work and all these mindfulness exercises, that's a band-aid. If you have, that's not going to get you out of a really bad situation. So I just kept
Yeah.
pushing it down. It also wasn't my passion. It wasn't just because it was toxic. And for years of doing that, the body will rebel, right? Your
Yeah.
job can make you sick. A bad relationship can make you sick. And as someone who has been healthy my entire life, I told you as a child, I was never in the hospital. I never got sick.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I was getting these terrible migraines. And for someone who hasn't had a migraine, it's not just a bad headache. Like for me, it was debilitating. I remember being in bed for like 2 weeks because I couldn't, moving my head was
Uh,
excruciating.
yeah.
And I was working with a neurologist in New York who specialized in headaches. And after like a few rounds of trying multiple medications, she brought me into her office. That's when you know you're in trouble at the doctor.
I need to talk to you. Yeah.
When the desk is between you instead of the patient room. And
Yeah.
she pulled out a chart. She said, listen, we can work through all these medications. And I'm happy to do that. But none of them are going to work if you don't change your lifestyle. And I looked at her, I'm like, "My lifestyle?"
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she's like, "Your work." Right? Because she knew the hours I was working. We were on the road all the time. So we were eating, nice fast food, the likes of Panera, right? With a lot of
Yeah.
chemical stuff in it. We weren't sleeping much because we would, meet up at 7:30, we'd work till 8, we'd get food, and then we'd go back to work in our rooms. And so it was just for a short, intense period, right? That's okay. But when you do that for years on end, it starts to really affect your body. And we can overcome a lot with our mind,
Yeah.
right? We can be in denial, but the body will rebel. And so for me, it was headaches, really bad migraines. And I was on up to 8 different medicines at once. There's the ones to prevent it, the one you take when you think it's coming. There were caffeine pills, there were allergy pills, there were nose sprays. There were different vitamins. It was absurd. But then when she started talking about, injecting Botox into my scalp, I'm like, when does this end? And by the
Right.
way, I
And
don't have time for all these doctor's appointments because I
yeah,
could be working.
you need to be at work. Yeah. Well, let me bring you back to a story, and the stories become more unbelievable, and yet they're so believable. Before we talk about what you did above and beyond taking medicine to solve this, and you decided to move on to a different
Yeah.
career, tell us about the story whereby uh, you had hand surgery and you
Oh, yeah.
alerted the boss. Tell us about that, because I'm smiling because, and you're smiling too, because it's over, but
Yeah.
it's just awful. So go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot about it, and it's so ridiculous, it's so unbelievable, but, in finance and consulting, you're in Excel 10 plus hours a day, and you're weak if you use your mouse. My finance people will know this. You would never be caught dead using your mouse as a finance professional. So you're like this all day. You know all the shortcuts, and you're like this on your keyboard. And so I had developed like a bump, a cyst, something that needed to be like cut off and removed surgically. And so I went in. I did it on a Friday. I think it was like before a holiday weekend because I didn't want to disrupt work. And it was, an outpatient thing. They cut it off, whatever, and I had a brace on, like a
Yeah.
brace that went all the way up to here, so I didn't have my mobility in my hand. I should have brought up I might actually be able to find the picture of it, how gross it was. Not that we need to put that on your
Okay.
everyone here needs to see this. But, I got home, I told my boss, "Hey, I'm home. I got this, I'll see you next week." And he was like, "Well, how bad is it?" And I was like, "Well, I'm in a brace." He's like, "Well, can you do your work with one hand?" And it was like, I had a lot of moments like that. And this wasn't even the worst. It's funny now, but this wasn't even the worst of it. But when he said, "Can you do it with one hand?" Right? Instead of taking the afternoon off.
Right.
While I'm in this, cast thing.
Right. Well, let's back up with it. Not even like, how are you feeling?
Oh, no, of course not. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that.
Well, but that would be the civil, if not humane thing.
Humane.
Can
Yeah.
you type with one hand? Incredible.
Yeah. Ridiculous. But that was like, we get these signs, and
Yeah.
anyone listening to this, I'm sure you've had 5, 10 different signs, and then you're shocked in the moment, and then you move on to the next thing because you just can't deal with it or you just can't believe it, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
I wouldn't write something down. I would wonder later, did I make up this story? It's so, so extreme.
Yeah.
We need to be like hit over the head with this is not right sometimes over and over and over before we see it.
Yes. And I love this quote of yours that I found. Success is about more than money, title, and prestige. You can have all of that, but if you're in the wrong job, it won't matter. You will never be truly fulfilled in the long run. I couldn't agree more. But let me
Mm,
ask you this, because you are in a prestigious, high-paying role,
yeah.
challenging, and difficult and toxic, if that's fair. In my experience in working in television production in New York for many years, I tried to learn from my managers, usually the worst managers, and tried not to copy that in my own management style as an executive producer. But
Mm.
my question for you is, I felt I was in the right job. I loved the work. I love journalism. I love storytelling. I love to be in the center of what was going on in the world. So it felt like the right job, but the boss or supervisor who is either micromanaging, bullying, and creating this toxic environment, either directly with me or throughout the entire organization. How do you deal with that situation when this is your dream job? And I don't think there is such a thing, but when you've worked so hard to get there and you don't want to let the bully win. So how did you reconcile that? And how do you reconcile that or work with that with your clients?
Yeah. So, a dream job is not just getting to do work you love,
Yeah.
but we realize as we get older, it's about being seen, heard, respected, the ability to be impactful, the ability to, feel fulfilled, not just at work, but outside of work. So, my definition of dream job covers a lot more than just do I like the work. If you know that you do love the work, then you get to ask yourself, and this is something about consulting. I'm not putting down the consulting firms I worked for, the industry. Part of that is the nature of it. The nature of the work, the nature of the intensity, it tends to attract really strong personalities. And whether it's right or wrong, whether it's healthy or not, that's the industry. That is what for consulting, for finance, for restructuring, that was just the industry. Now, that's not the case for everyone. I could have looked if I wanted to stay in consulting, I could have looked at lighter, even within the same organization, we had groups that were, lighter, less intense, a little
Yeah.
more fluffy. And I'm sure we had our noses in the air when we would say that, right?
Sure.
They had more of a regular schedule and there was more balance. So
Yeah.
you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, number one, do I actually love the work if I could take away the unhealthy pieces? And if so, is this a culture issue? Is this a manager issue? Is this a company issue? Or is this just the way the industry is? And even if I were to go to another company, it would pretty much be the same. And then you get to decide, does this work for me? And if not, we get to find a way that you get to do the work you love, but in an industry or a sector or a group, right? That doesn't have the aspects that are not in alignment with you.
Well, and similar to your circumstance, I mean, I moved to New York to do television, and I kind of thought throughout, and I never realized really that I was being bullied. I just, to your point, thought,
Yeah.
this is what it is. This is New York. This is media. And I guess my shame, if you will, because I didn't stand up to it, I just kept thinking if I go back to my desk and do better, work harder, win more awards, get more viewers, that then it'll change. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't stand up to it. But part of it was kind of, and again, forgive the gendered nature of this term, but it's like, man up. You asked for it. You came to New York to do television. Why are you such a wimp kind of thing? And so
Mm.
all these conflicting feelings that go into finding a better circumstance, because you're right. I love the work, but I shouldn't have allowed myself to have digestive issues and
Mm,
high anxiety and hypervigilance and also suicidal ideation. And I don't want to make more of it than what it was. I never thought about
yeah.
unaliving myself, as they say it now, but there was a lot of physical trauma there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of what we talk about, and it normally is more on the positive side, but it also includes the negative, like defining success on your own terms,
Yeah.
right? You don't get at the end of your life, no one gives you a gold star and a badge for tolerating most toxic environment, right? And so much of the work that I do with my clients, it's defining success on our own terms. It's looking at the situation and also taking responsibility for your part, right?
Yeah.
Because yes, we wanna make sure we're in healthy environments and we're working with healthy managers and, right, they're humans too, and part of it is how do we show up? Where is our self-worth? Where do we set a boundary, whether directly or indirectly? And there's a lot that can change, and I even gave you some examples in our pre-talk. There's a lot that you can change simply by how you show up, and if that doesn't work, then it's your responsibility, just like you would if you had a child and they were in a school where they were bullied or the
Yeah.
teachers weren't paying attention to them or blamed them. What would you do as a parent?
Yeah. Well,
You
let
would
me
kick
check
your
to this.
child out of the school, right? So
You sure would.
so
Or,
you
well, let me ask, because I want to be clear on this point for my own, because I'm
yes.
learning from you, and I know
Oh,
you are too, but I have to stop you because I'm learning too. You said you have to work on how you show up. What
yeah.
do you mean by that? Because I in my own way, the way I did it, I showed up early, I stayed late, I worked hard. So what do you mean by, showing up in the proper fashion?
What I mean is, there's the way that you show up externally, but even before that, and even more important in how that is influenced, is how you show up for yourself. What is the inner work?
Okay.
As many times, those of us who are bullied, we're people pleasers. We want to make the person
Yes.
happy. We're peacemakers. There,
Yes.
there can be even a bit of a, and I see this not just in personal relationships, but at work, there can even be a little bit of codependency. I'm not okay if my boss is not okay. If they're upset, I have anxiety.
Oh, I've never heard anybody say that. That's
Yeah.
such a great point, because I've worked in big organizations and small organizations, and both toxic in their own ways. But in a smaller one, I used to wait for the boss, who he wasn't the bully, but the number two guy was, and they were kind of simpatico. Watched the CEO walk in, and if he was not looking good, I was like, "Oh boy, now what can I do to make him feel better? What can I do today
Yep.
to?" Yeah, so that's me. I'm a classic
Yeah.
target, I think. But go ahead. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
And this is not, I want to be like really clear. This is not putting any blame or anyone called it in or anyone, whatever. It just tends to be that people who are empathetic, depending
Yeah,
on the family dynamics, how you grew up, right? This might be a pattern that was already in place.
yeah,
And so it's not about blaming yourself, but it's about doing the work, the self work, the self worth to know what is okay, what is not okay. And if we can't do that for ourselves, think about what would you tell a friend? What would you, I was saying like you would get your child out of a toxic situation if things
yeah,
weren't working. So why do we tolerate it? Why do we think that we deserve even just like a simple question? And this is probably going to sound really woo woo to some people, but like,
yeah,
what would I do if I loved myself? Let's go crazy. Let's say that
yeah,
I actually loved myself. Would I stay here?
yeah.
Or would I stand up for myself?
Well, I think so. I think so many of us too. And you're the expert. I'm not. I'm just learning. But uh, it almost gets into this psychology of I deserve this. You know what I mean? It feels like, and I grew up in a great family, so this is adoring and loving. But it almost feels like, again, I'm just not doing enough. And let me go to another point, which I love you make. You use a word that I really like, but I don't hear it a lot. You talk about um, how important alignment is in your personal life, in your professional life. Why? is alignment so elemental to the work you do?
Because without it, you can't have lasting fulfillment and impact. That is the most simple answer. When I say alignment, we're really thinking about who am I? Who am I now, right? The person you were when you got your first job is probably different, right? For whatever age, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. But who am I? What are my values, right? What are my morals with a lot of the industries you and I are talking about, morals
Yeah,
and what are my values? What are my top priorities in life? Sometimes at some point, career might not be number one. And guess what?
yeah,
It's okay.
yeah,
Right? And then looking at the way you're living your life, the way you're spending your time, the way you're spending your money, and asking yourself, if someone who didn't know me were to come down, if an alien were to come down, could they tell by looking at my day to day, could they tell what and who was important to me? And if not, it's not in alignment, right? It's
yeah,
not be a perfect balance every day, right?
right.
But if someone were to look at my credit card statements and watch me throughout the day, they could very clearly tell what was important to me,
Yes.
right? So the alignment is also a way to take responsibility for what's important to you, how you define success. And so it's not a matter of this job is wrong or this person is wrong, but what is the right fit, the right job for me where I can thrive, right? You wouldn't expect a cactus to thrive in the rainforest.
Yeah.
And so many of us are in jobs that we don't come naturally to us, that we have to tolerate a lot, that do make us miserable, that feel tedious, right? That we dread on day night,
Yeah.
um, and that are literally making us sick. And when we're in this constant state of fight or flight, nervous system arousal, which happens, right? If you're being bullied or it's just unhealthy, that is literally having an effect on your DNA. You are
Yeah.
literally opening yourself up to diseases, especially autoimmune stuff, years down the line. And maybe it's a migraine, maybe it's fibromyalgia. And there's so many. I've had clients who, because of a taxing job, have ended up in the hospital and they're still trying to take calls.
In the hospital.
Like, oh my
Unbelievable.
God.
Well, and let me say this because I'm thinking back on what I've been saying about, oh, I was in television in New York. And I'm not suggesting that somehow my job was more stressful. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody in any job who said, oh, yeah, my job's great. I put up my feet. I take 3 hour breaks. I mean, every job is stressful, or almost every job has high stress because you got to perform. I don't care what that is. If you're cleaning up, if you're doing clerical, I don't care. You're an intern. That can be one of the most stressful possible things. Medical intern for sure, but also just starting on a cop. Every job I ever had, whether I was making minimum wage, and by the way, I lost my first job because I was making minimum wage and they told me I was too expensive. That was my introduction to media. And
Wow.
every job is stressful. So my question is, I guess, kind of twofold. One is, can you have alignment in a stressful job, which I believe we all have stressful jobs, whether we're in finance, media, or any other industry, medicine, healthcare, nonprofit, I don't care what it is. And I sure wish I would have met you about 25, 30 years ago, because I think you could have saved me from a great deal of pain. But having said that, can we have it? And if I had come to you years ago, could you have helped me, do you think?
Of course.
Okay.
Hey,
So I guess my general
yeah.
question is, if people think that they're going through this, what can a coach like you do for them?
Yeah.
And for
Yeah, and if you came to me 25, 30 years ago, I was in the middle of my own, mess, but if it was you 25 years ago and me now, that would be a good
okay. I think I'm going to say you were in high school and that wouldn't have done any, that wouldn't have worked, but okay.
maybe, I don't know. Um, but what was
So what can a coach do
yeah,
for
what
somebody
can
in
you
this
do?
circumstance? Yeah.
So every job isn't I work with all, professionals who care about their work. They are driven. They care so much about their work, right? We're working together, right? That alone says something, right? That career is a top priority for them. But every job has the potential for stress. Literally, if you are a
Yeah.
barista or you are a CEO, but every job is not or shouldn't be so stressful that it's making you sick. Even like you said, like digestive problems, like I'm sick to my stomach. I feel my heart racing when a certain person walks by.
Yes.
I'm terrified of being asked a question and not knowing the answer, right? Those pieces, right? There's your piece and then there's the piece of the work. So the inner work is, how do we handle that stress? How do we look at, why am I so triggered, and what is mine to own and work on, and what is just a factor of the environment?
Yep.
Because times that stress is, if you're stressed about a deadline or you're stressed about making a mistake, when we really dig into it, because a lot of the work I do with my clients is inner work. When we dig into it, there's actually no real threat at work. They're responding to a bad experience from the past, and on a nervous system primal level, this reminds them of that. And there is this real link, right, in the limbic brain, in the very basic animal brain of, if I make a mistake, I will die and be cast out. I
Yeah.
have clients who are super high performers. They're so afraid of being fired.
Yeah.
And it's, when
Yeah.
we really look at it, the reality is there's no way they're gonna get fired, and even if they did, they have such a great network, they land a job like that, right?
That's really helpful, I think, to realize and think about there is a future. You think, I think most of us, when we're working, that's the center of the universe, no matter where it is. It's like that's where it's all happening. And I'm going back, I can't help myself, but going back to about that showing up thing. And again, I had a pretty top job. I had usually 50 people that were part of my team. I had teams all over the world in certain jobs. And yet I'm going to acknowledge this because this is part of my work is I think I showed up scared. When you talk about, I was scared all the time that we're not going to get the ratings. I'm going to, a show's not going to be good. I'm going to lose this job. And so when you talk about the work you're doing with other people, I know that you're helping people find fulfillment. I think that's a fair thing. But you also said something to me again in our previous conversation about starting small when they come to you in terms of, not trying to change your world immediately. What do you mean by that in terms of giving yourself space to kind of look at other things? Was that part of it?
Yeah, so and you're reminding me, I'm not sure we answered the full question before
Okay,
about, like,
please.
show up. It
Okay.
is inner work, but then the inner work allows, sometimes that alone is enough because that can be felt. To your point, when you show up scared,
Yeah.
people know it.
They smell it.
Yes, we're animals. We feel
Yeah,
it.
I think my
That's
bosses
smell
smelled
it.
it. They knew I was gonna go back to my desk and try harder and not stand up to them, come up to them, and I'm not a shy person. I was never bullied as a young person, but I let it happen at work, and I'm ashamed of it, and I'm working on that.
Yeah, I mean, if we were working together, I would tell you there's no shame. You're doing the best you could at the time,
Yeah,
right? And it's a very common problem. And the shame doesn't help. I would look at it with love and compassion. And wow, we did the best with what we knew at the
yeah,
time. And that has worked for us in the past. And now we've outgrown that,
yeah,
right? That it
yeah,
no longer serves us. So I don't think it's helpful, right, to have that shame.
yeah,
Um, but you have the inner work, and then how you show up is, it's in what you say, it's in what you don't say, it's when you pick up the phone, it's when you don't pick up the phone, it's how you get rattled or you don't, right? It's how you handle things and what is okay and what's not. So there's the external piece and there's the internal piece. Um, but what was your last
well,
question?
and
Then
then I wanted to get to because, you talked about starting small.
Oh, yeah, starting small. We're not blowing up your whole life. Sometimes
Yeah,
we're afraid to tell ourselves the truth, Andy.
yeah, yeah,
As if I tell myself the truth, if I admit to myself that finance is not my passion,
yeah.
my whole world, I don't think I can deal. My whole world
No,
changed.
right, that's, like, scary because that's what you know, that's what you're good at, that's what you've been successful at, and it doesn't matter what,
It's
area
really
you're
hard. It's
in.
hard. Change is
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
One thing I want to pop in here to make sure we get to it is, it's one thing to I took pride in being able to handle anything. You could beat me up and I'm still gonna be standing. That was
me
something I
too, me too.
took a lot of pride in that. The problem is, no matter how strong you are,
Yeah,
over time, when you are tolerating an unhealthy environment over a long period of time and potentially kind of some verbal abuse, you're not good enough, it's never good enough, blah, blah, blah. It will affect the confidence of the strongest personality.
yeah,
I'm, working with someone who's valedictorian. She is if you knew her story, where she came from, where she is super successful. And she's in a toxic environment, and it's absolutely she tells me, "I don't think I can do better. What if there is nothing better?" Right? And so it will seep in and affect you no matter how strong you are. So you have to care for yourself enough to have that attitude again, like you take your child out of an unhealthy environment, you take yourself out of the unhealthy environment because it's causing serious permanent damage. And, so much of what happens in a toxic bullying environment is it is leaving our nervous system on high alert. And so I'm not going to have someone come to me and we blow up their whole life when literally their system can't handle it. And so we start small. We start with the inner work. We start by looking at the patterns. We start with what are the little tweaks we can make. And then it's like titrating. Let's go back to chemistry class. Little
Uh-huh.
by little versus like pouring the whole beaker of whatever in and causing a fire, right?
Sure, sure. And so in the moments we have remaining, you did all this. You
Yeah.
were in the role that you talked about in finance, and you made a life change. So tell us about that and about your consultancy now. How was the transition? How long did it take you, and how difficult was it?
I mean, it certainly was difficult, but it had gotten to the point where saying where I was more difficult. Um, you know, the health issues and, there were the migraines were kind of the external thing, but I was also upset. I, was emotionally drained. We talk about alignment. I'm big on freedom, love, adventure. I That's in my work, that's in my relationships, that's in how I live. And that my job at that time, it didn't allow for that. I was traveling 5, 6 days a week. I was stuck in a conference room with 12 other guys, you
Yeah,
know, and smelling the lunch that was in the garbage of onions,
yeah,
right? Like, I mean, it was eating junk food. Like it was not in alignment. I couldn't have a relationship. I was never home, right? Even friendships were hard to maintain. And so, of course, I was going to be unhappy and I wouldn't have known at the time, but probably some level of depression as well.
yeah,
Right? And so it for me had gotten to a point where it was so bad, I didn't feel like staying was an option. And so, and of course I had started the job search, but it was hard to job search when you're working 80 hours a week. I would bring 2 computers on trips,
yeah.
one for my search and one for my work, right? And that just wasn't sustainable either. And so it really for me got to a breaking point. I love it when clients come to me before it's a breaking point, before it's crisis. But for me, it had just everything added up. It wasn't healthy for me. I needed to leave as scary as that was. And the work that I did, clarity work, figuring out who I was, what I wanted, even if I wasn't totally sure, I knew what I did like personally and professionally. I built a personal brand around that. Then this is kind of the jobs. The way that I teach job search is what we should all be doing for a career anyway. Um, I did a lot of networking, right? And ultimately, I changed careers into marketing and strategy, which was way more fun for healthy companies. I got to be creative, had more
Great.
of a mix. It wasn't totally male dominated. It was physical things that I could see. Like, I never got excited about derivatives. Like, I wasn't talking about that at night, right? But I
Yeah,
was talking about the psychology in a campaign. And I like this store versus that store. And I like how they did that, right? And so when I changed careers, people asked me, "How did you do this? Can you help me? And how did you get a promotion at the same time? Because you've never done this." And so that was the start of the career coaching, even though I didn't know it at the time. Then I wrote Job Joy and I was like, oh no, I have to listen to my own advice because I
yeah,
knew I wanted to do this full time. But it's scary building a business and going out on your own. And then you have the idea of what are other people going to think?
yeah,
But the reality is, right now, I'm, you know, having a great conversation. I'm happy. I have the windows open. I'm in a great environment. I make my own schedule. I help
sure.
people to be happier at work, help them have the freedom that I wanted so much.
Yeah.
And so even if someone from my past does have an opinion, like I really don't care at this point.
It
But at
doesn't
that
matter.
point, it was a thought of what are people gonna think, or maybe she can't hack it in corporate or whatever,
Yeah,
and now those people are coming to me. Like, I have clients who were past colleagues.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm not surprised, and it seems a bit from afar. We've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit in the process, but boy, you seem so passionate. You're so knowledgeable. and you can see it in your face, and I think if we were talking about derivatives, I don't think I'd see the happiness, the smiles
Now,
in your face. It seems to me that you did the exact right thing and you're doing just that for other people. And I can't imagine a better service than what you're providing. So thank you for that. Thank you for helping me, because this has been so informative and engaging for me in the conversation. And thank you for taking the time. Having said that, I understand you have an offering for the folks listening and watching.
yes, absolutely. So if, you're listening to this and you know that it is time to look elsewhere, you do want to look for another job, I have a quick training that takes you through the top things to update on your LinkedIn profile so that you can attract in those perfect for you opportunities, so that when you do schedule interviews and recruiters, they can come to your profile and you can feel really proud of what they're going to find. And it's going to show before they even talk to you why you're a perfect fit for the job.
All right, great. That'll be wonderful. And it's never too late. I'm even starting kind of a new career, a couple new careers, and it's not too late to understand what's best for you and what will bring you joy and happiness. How can people reach out to you, Kristen?
Yeah, so my website is findyourjobjoy.com. My email is Kristen, it's Kristen, at findyourjobjoy.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, just my name. If you are on TikTok, I'm there too. I'm not sure for how much longer.
Keep
I got
going.
Yes, I
Keep
got on
going.
TikTok trends in 2020 and I'm starting to wonder, but I'm there for now. Where else? Those are probably the YouTube. I have a YouTube channel
Good.
that I recently started where I share weekly tips. So I'm all over the place.
All right. I love video. I've been in video my whole career, so I'll check all of those out. Thank you.
Awesome.
A word from me. We call ourselves bully targets, but now let's aim to change the workplace for good. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.